Hi there. I'm David Smith. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist, and I run Thriving Family Therapy, where I specialize in working with neurodivergent adults and families. But I'm not just speaking to you today as a therapist. I'm also speaking as a fellow traveler on this journey. I was diagnosed with autism at age 56, after years of working as a therapist, including several years working specifically with neurodivergent clients. The irony of this is not lost on me. I had helped dozens of people understand their own neurodivergence before I even recognized my own. So, when I talk about what it's like to discover you're autistic as an adult, I'm not just speaking from clinical training, I'm speaking from lived experience. If you're watching this video, chances are you've recently discovered something profound about yourself. You are, or strongly suspect you might be, autistic. Maybe you received a formal diagnosis. Maybe you've been exploring the possibility through research, online communities, or conversations with people who know you well. Either way, welcome. Think of this video as a welcome wagon, a concept from when I was growing up in the 1970s in the Midwestern US, where neighbors would greet newcomers to a neighborhood, bringing casseroles and telling you where you could find the cheapest eggs, the best coffee, and which neighbors have dogs that bark at 3 a.m. You just moved into a new neighborhood, the neurodivergent community. While it might feel unfamiliar and even disorienting right now, there's a whole community out there that understands your experience, maybe in ways that no one in your life ever has before. This video is my attempt to offer you the information, support, and resources I wish someone had given me when I was first navigating this territory. Take what's helpful, leave what isn't, and know that wherever you are in this journey, you're not alone. Let's dive in. Let's start with understanding what autism actually is and isn't. First, I want to acknowledge that our understanding of autism is evolving incredibly fast. Even within professional communities, therapists, psychologists, researchers, and so on, a lot of what we learned even just 2 or 3 years ago is already out of date. So approach everything you hear, including what I'm saying in this video, with the awareness that the landscape is shifting fast. Autism, as we currently understand it, is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition that affects how a person communicates, interacts with others, and experiences the world. It's recognized as a spectrum because there's enormous variation in how autism shows up from person to person. The old stereotypes, the nonverbal child rocking in a corner, the savant mathematician, represent only a tiny fraction of autistic people. If you've been diagnosed as an adult, you likely don't fit those stereotypes at all. I like to think about autism as a spice mix, like garam masala or adobo or chili powder. Like any of these blends, there are certain basic ingredients that define what it is to be autistic. Differences in social communication, sensory processing, patterns of thinking and behavior. Just like in cooking, the specific blend and intensity varies enormously from person to person. Someone might have just a light dash of the neurospiciness, while someone else got the whole bottle dumped in. This is why the statement, everyone's a little autistic, drives many of us absolutely crazy. Yes, autistic traits exist on a continuum in the general population, but having the occasional socially awkward moment is not the same as a lifetime of navigating a world that wasn't designed for how your brain works. It's like telling someone with severe rheumatoid arthritis that your joints hurt sometimes too, especially on rainy days. Not the same thing. Let me walk you through the core characteristics that many autistic adults share. Communication differences. Many of us struggle with literal thinking. Idioms, sarcasm, and abstract language can be genuinely confusing. We might have difficulty with the give and take of difficult conversations, interrupting without meaning to, or going deep on topics we're passionate about while people's eyes glaze over. Even as a therapist who talks all day, I struggle with day-to-day conversation. Just ask my wife. Sensory sensitivities. This is huge. We might be hypersensitive to bright lights, loud noises, certain textures. The seams and tags on clothing are an infamous problem, or particular smells. Or we might be hyposensitive and actively seek out sensory input. Many of us prefer controlled environments that are predictable because sensory overwhelm is a real and sometimes debilitating experience. Need for routine and predictability. Changes to routine or unexpected events can cause real anxiety and distress. Even a brief interruption in our train of thought can feel like a train wreck. Intense focused interests. We tend to develop deep, sometimes encyclopedic knowledge of specific topics. These special interests provide comfort and joy, but they can also present a social challenge because not everyone wants to hear a 20-minute dissertation on sea mammals or the neuropsychology of autism at a dinner party. Ask me how I know. Social interaction differences. Understanding unwritten social rules is hard. We might miss or misinterpret facial expressions, body language, or tone of voice. And social interactions, even positive ones with people we enjoy, are often exhausting. If you were diagnosed as an adult, you're almost certainly someone who has spent years or decades masking your autistic traits. High masking autism refers to the ability to consciously or unconsciously suppress or hide autistic traits to conform to social norms. It's a learned behavior, usually developed to avoid stigma, parental disapproval, bullying by peers, negative attention from teachers, or to fit into social groups. To some degree, everyone does this. Think about how you dress and act when hanging out with close friends versus going to a job interview. Everyone masks to some extent. The question is how much, how often, and how far away is the mask from your core identity? What does masking look like? Mimicry, imitating others' social behaviors, facial expressions, gestures, and phrases to appear more typical. Some autistic people practice in the mirror. For others, the mimicry is largely unconscious and automatic. Suppression, avoiding stimming behaviors like hand flapping, rocking, or fidgeting that help us regulate emotions and sensory input. Scripting, memorizing responses and social scripts for conversations, or preparing topics in advance. Social camouflage, developing complex strategies to hide difficulties while appearing extroverted and engaged, even when you're exhausted or feeling completely dissociated. Here's what I need you to understand. Masking comes at a high price. Constantly masking requires significant mental and emotional energy, leading to fatigue and emotional exhaustion. The fear of being discovered or misunderstood causes chronic stress. That disconnect between who you are internally and who you present to the world can lead to a profound sense of inauthenticity and confusion about your true self. Research is now showing that masking is linked to depression, anxiety, burnout, and even suicidality in autistic adults. This isn't a trivial issue. It's a matter of mental and physical health. Here's the uncomfortable truth. There's no simple answer to how much masking is right. Complete unmasking in a world not designed for autistic people can have real social and professional consequences. But chronic intensive masking is genuinely harmful to our well-being. The goal isn't to eliminate masking entirely. It's to become more conscious about when and why you mask, and to create spaces in your life where you can be authentically yourself. Over time, many late diagnosed autistic people find that they gradually expand the spaces where they can be authentic as they develop more self-acceptance and find communities that accept them as they are. If you're feeling like you're on an emotional roller coaster, that's completely normal. Let me name some of what you might be experiencing. Relief and validation. For many people, the dominant initial emotion is relief. Finally, something makes sense. All those years of struggling with things that seemed easy for everyone else, of feeling like an alien trying to pass as human, of wondering what was wrong with you, there's now an explanation. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not a disappointment or a failure as a human being. You're autistic, and that explains so much. This relief can feel like coming home, like finally having a name for an experience you've lived with your whole life. I felt the same way when I got my own diagnosis. I told my wife, after I got out of the assessment, that it looked like I was autistic, and she looked at me and said, "Dear, of course you are," and gave me a big hug. It's one of the most special moments of my life. But alongside that relief often comes grief. Grief for the child who struggled without understanding why, grief for the years spent trying to be something you weren't, grief for the relationships that failed because you didn't know how to explain what you needed, grief for the career paths not taken, the opportunities missed, the energy wasted on trying to fit in. What if I had known earlier is one of the most painful questions I hear when I'm working with people. It's a question without a satisfying answer because you can't go back. The past is past. But it's natural to mourn the roads not traveled. And then there's the anger. How did no one for decades ever consider the possibility that we weren't weird, broken, or mentally ill? We were just wired differently. Not the teachers, not the therapists, not the graduate school professors or clinical supervisors who trained me to be a therapist myself. This anger is valid. It doesn't mean anyone was malicious. Often it just means the understanding wasn't there about what autism can look like in adults. Let's face it, decades ago, people simply had no concept that autism could look like this. They were looking for something else. But valid explanations don't make valid emotions disappear. You're allowed to be angry. Cognitive dissonance is another common experience. Many people experience a jarring disconnect between their lived experience and the stereotypes they've internalized about autism. But I can make eye contact, but I have friends, but I'm married, but I have a successful career. These things shouldn't happen, right? If we're listening to the stereotypes that we absorbed as children. The stereotypes are wrong. They were developed based on studies of primarily white male children with more visible presentations of autism. They do not capture the full range of autistic experience. Be patient with yourself. You're not an imposter. The definition of autism was just too narrow for too long. Self-imposed gaslighting is another experience that many people have. Many late diagnosed autistic people spent years minimizing their own struggles. Things could be a lot worse. Other people have it harder. I'm just being dramatic. We've been taught, explicitly or implicitly, that our struggles aren't valid. But here's the truth. Your struggles were real, and they still are. The fact that you survived and even achieved things doesn't mean it wasn't harder for you than it would have been for a neurotypical person. You can acknowledge both your resilience and your difficulties. Pain is not relative. Pain is pain. And yours deserves compassionate witnessing, starting with yourself. Autism rarely travels alone. Understanding the conditions that commonly co-occur with autism can help you get comprehensive support. Research suggests that 50 to 70% of autistic people also have ADHD and vice versa. The combination, sometimes called ADHD, creates a unique profile where the characteristics of both conditions interact and can amplify each other. If you have both, you might experience the autistic need for routine clashing with ADHD's craving for novelty and stimulation. Executive function challenges can be particularly pronounced. Anxiety and depression. Autistic adults have significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression than the general population. This isn't because autism inherently causes these conditions, but rather because of the chronic stress of navigating a world not designed for us. Experiences of bullying and social exclusion, the exhaustion of masking, and often years of invalidation. Trauma and PTSD. The statistics are sobering. 60% of autistic adults report symptoms congruent with PTSD in their lifetime, compared to just 4.5% of the general population in the US. Autistic people are more than 4 times as likely to be diagnosed with PTSD. This elevated rate comes from multiple sources. Our neurobiological vulnerability, more sensitive, less resilient nervous systems, higher exposure to traumatic events like bullying, victimization, and abuse, chronic invalidation throughout our lives, and sometimes trauma from the very interventions that were supposed to help us. If you have a history of trauma, it's important to work with a therapist who understands both autism and complex trauma. The two conditions interact in complex ways. PDA, pathological demand avoidance, also called persistent drive for autonomy, is characterized by an extreme need for autonomy and an intense anxiety response to everyday demands. Even simple requests, or even self-imposed demands, can trigger a profound avoidance response. If you find that you can't do tasks you genuinely want to do, if you feel overwhelming resistance to requests from others or even from yourself, even your own bodily needs like hunger and the need for sleep, if shoulds feel unbearable, you might have a PDA profile. Understanding this can be transformative because the strategies that help with PDA are different from standard autism accommodations and very different from typical productivity advice. If you've noticed that standard self-help advice doesn't work for you, that just relax or think positive feels useless or even makes things worse, it's not a personal failing, it's neurobiology. Understanding how your nervous system works can transform how you approach regulation, self-care, and even relationships. Polyvagal theory describes how our autonomic nervous system operates through 3 distinct states. Ventral vagal is the safe and social state. This is where we feel safe, connected, and flexible. When we're here, we can think clearly, feel present, connect with others, and respond to challenges without being overwhelmed. This is where we want to spend most of our time. We're within our window of tolerance. Sympathetic is the fight or flight state. When our nervous system detects threat, it shifts into mobilization. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense up. For autistic people, this shows up as meltdowns, sensory overload responses, and anxiety spirals. Autistic people and neurodivergent people in general tend to spend a lot of our time in a sympathetic nervous system state. And then there's dorsal vagal, which is shut down or freeze. When threats feel too overwhelming to fight or escape, the nervous system goes into shutdown. This shows up as numbness, disconnection, brain fog, extreme fatigue, and difficulty speaking or moving. For autistic people, this includes shutdowns, dissociations, and ultimately autistic burnout. Here's what's crucial to understand. Many autistic people have difficulty accessing the ventral vagal safe state. Not because we don't want connection or aren't trying, but because our nervous system is frequently operating in defense mode. As Temple Grandin put it, my nervous system was reacting as if I were in a jungle surrounded by dangerous predators. Sensory experiences that feel neutral to neurotypical people can register as threats to autistic individuals. Social situations require exhausting vigilance. Unexpected changes trigger a threat response. If you have a PDA profile, demands or expectations from others can also trigger sympathetic nervous system activation or even a shutdown. This is why traditional stress management advice often fails us. You can't think or self-care your way out of a nervous system state. The body has to feel safe before the mind can calm down. Autistic people often have narrower windows of tolerance than neurotypical people, especially when our resources are already depleted through stress. Things that would be manageable on a good day can push you over the edge on a bad one. Just think about how you react when you're feeling rested, when you've had good interactions with your loved ones, when you are facing a good day with good weather, sun is shining, and all the rest, versus when you haven't had much sleep, when you had an argument with someone close to you, when you're running behind, you're late, and you're wearing clothes that just don't fit right and feel bad on your skin. You're likely to react much differently on those 2 days. The good news, with the right approaches, you can gradually widen your window of tolerance. This doesn't happen through willpower or toughing it out. In fact, those things can backfire. It happens through consistent experiences of safety and successful regulation. So let me give you some immediate regulation tools that are practical and actionable today. Breathing is the first. We always have access to our breath. The physiological sigh, 2 short inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth, like this. The physiological sigh is one of the fastest ways to activate your calming nervous system. It triggers the vagus nerve and allows us to access a safer state. Temperature is also helpful. Splashing cold water on your face triggers what's called the dive reflex in mammals, rapidly activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which gets us back into balance from a sympathetic state. This can interrupt panic attacks or intense anxiety. Movement is also critical. When in fight or flight, movement helps discharge the energy. The root of the word emotion in both Latin and Greek just means energy and motion. That energy, whatever it is, has to move. Shake, walk briskly, push against a wall, move some heavy furniture, even if you just move it right back. Whatever works. When you're in shutdown, start with tiny movements. Wiggle your fingers and toes or gently turn your head. Just move. Grounding is also essential. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique, the 5 senses, involves naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 that you can taste. If you really focus on each of these things, not just ticking them off, but really putting your attention on each of those things that you're seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting, eventually you will come back to the present moment and your anxiety will stop racing through your mind. Let me share some practical strategies for creating a life that works with your autistic neurology, not against it. Managing sensory input is crucial for autistic people. This isn't accommodation as a luxury, it's accommodation as necessity. Consider environmental modifications, warm tone lighting instead of fluorescents, sound dampening furnishings, reducing visual clutter. You can build yourself a sensory toolkit, including things like noise-canceling headphones, weighted blankets, fidget toys, sunglasses for bright environments, comfortable clothing that doesn't have irritating tags on it. Create at least one sensory sanctuary in your home, a place where your nervous system can rest. In elementary schools, teachers will often create a calming corner in their classroom which is full of little things that will help kids cool off when they're feeling overstimulated or just having a hard day. Create something like that in your own home. Establishing routines and predictability is also crucial. Routine isn't rigidity, it's providing your nervous system with predictability that frees up cognitive resources for other things. Use calendars and planners, develop morning and evening rituals that anchor your day, build in transition time. Rest transitions keep the nervous system activated. Setting healthy boundaries is also important. Many autistic people struggle with boundaries, saying yes when we mean no, overcommitting, or not recognizing our own limits until we're crashing. Practice self-advocacy. Know when to say no. Remember, if your no has no meaning, neither does your yes. Rest before you need it. Proactive rest prevents the deep depletion that leads to burnout. Another important point is the idea of subtractive self-care. Rather than adding more things to do when you're depleted, even self-care activities, focus on what you can remove. What demands can you eliminate? What obligations can you decline? What sensory stressors can you reduce? When you're depleted, adding a bubble bath isn't going to help. You need to stop the bleeding first. As you integrate this new understanding of yourself, there are some common pitfalls to be aware of. These are things that we see often on the journey after diagnosis or discovery. Autistic burnout is one to really watch out for. It's a very real and very serious condition, qualitatively different from what neurotypical people experience. It's the cumulative toll of masking, of processing overwhelming sensory input, of translating social cues, of compensating for executive function differences. Signs of autistic burnout include increased sensory sensitivity, profound exhaustion that doesn't improve with rest, loss of skills you've developed over many years, more frequent meltdowns or shutdowns, inability to mask even when you previously could, and simply an inability to function in the daily tasks of life for long periods of time. Recovery from autistic burnout doesn't follow the same timeline as regular burnout. It often requires significant reduction in demands. Capacity returns only when the nervous system experiences sustained relief. Over-identification with the autism diagnosis is another risk. When you first discover you're autistic, it can be tempting to filter everything through this new lens. Every struggle, every trait becomes because I'm autistic. You're still a whole person with multiple identities and experiences. Being autistic is one important aspect of who you are, but it's not the only thing. Another thing to watch out for is the idea of internalized ableism. Many of us have internalized negative messages about autism throughout our lives. These don't disappear with a diagnosis. You may find yourself thinking, I'm just using autism as an excuse, or if I were really trying, I could do this. Unlearning internalized ableism is ongoing work. The key message is don't should on yourself. What you are able to do and what support you need is valid and real. Treat yourself with compassion. There's also imposter syndrome. Many late diagnosed autistic people wonder, am I really autistic? What if I'm just making this up? What if I'm overreacting? This is extremely common and doesn't mean you're not autistic. If your experiences align with autism, if a qualified professional has assessed you, or if the autistic community recognizes you as one of us, you belong. The fact that you've successfully masked all this time doesn't mean you're not autistic. It means you've been working incredibly hard just to survive. If you're watching this and feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. This is a lot to take in. You don't have to integrate everything at once. You don't have to figure out your whole identity, your approach to disclosure, your accommodation needs, and your relationship to the autistic community all in the next week or month or year. What I want you to take away is this. You're not alone, and thriving is possible. I've seen it in my clients, and I've experienced it myself. With the right understanding and support, it's possible to go from merely surviving to truly thriving, even as an autistic person in a world that wasn't designed for us. Being autistic isn't something to fix or overcome. It's a different way of experiencing and moving through the world. There are challenges, absolutely, but there are also strengths, perspectives, and gifts that come with this neurology. The goal isn't to become neurotypical. It's to become more fully and authentically yourself. So take a deep breath. You've already taken an important step by watching this video. Now, choose one small thing to try today. That's enough. Be gentle with yourself. Your nervous system is doing the best it can. Welcome to the neighborhood. Before you go, I want to make sure you have some resources to take with you. I've created a free guide called Stress Regulation Strategies for Neurodivergent Adults. It's a practical, evidence-based resource with techniques to calm your nervous system, complete the stress cycle, and build resilience. You can download it for free at the link in the description. I've also created a comprehensive written guide that goes deeper into everything we've covered today, including an extensive resource list with books, podcasts, YouTube channels, and organizations. You'll be able to find that soon on my website. If you're looking for more support, I offer telehealth therapy to residents of Oregon, California, Idaho, Vermont, and Florida, as well as consultation services more broadly. I specialize in neurodiversity affirming and trauma-informed care for autistic adults, people with ADHD, those dealing with complex trauma, those with PDA profiles, and those who just have really complicated neurodivergent or traumatized family situations. If the video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to share it with someone who might be on their own journey of autistic discovery or with a family member. I'd love to hear where you are in your journey and what questions you still have. Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember, you're not broken, you're not alone, and you deserve support that actually understands how your brain works. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next video.